Well, it looks like it's all over now in the search for General Neil McCasland, on the ground at least. According to locals, very few law enforcement officials remain in the Sandia foothills searching the ground for any trace of him who vanished 20 days ago. Now the last hope of finding him depends on the digital search the FBI continues to conduct. There are still no clues or leads in the case, but there has been a changing story which is now leading investigators to focus on the scenario of self-harm. Let's take a look at the latest information out there. You remember there's a repairman who visited the house in the morning during that tight timeline, and it was reported at first that he had a normal interaction with McCasland. Well, he is now saying that the general seemed, quote, off to him. And reportedly, he described the general as being in a, quote, mental fog during their encounter. It is said that this led authorities to issue a silver alert in the very beginning of the search when he first disappeared. Now, a silver alert does not get the same media attention as a missing person case where foul play is suspected. It's also not handled the same by authorities. The authorities also, when they're conducting an investigation, they largely take the tone from the family that the family might have. They'll follow that. Well, McCasland's wife, Susan Wilkerson, has been controlling the narrative that goes out in the media reporting as far as downplaying any other possibilities or factors in her husband's disappearance other than the ground search. And the ground search is now drawing to a quiet close. So investigators, they were just responding accordingly this whole time, keeping briefings low-key, until the FBI became involved on March 11th, 12 days after he vanished. And that was where they started looking at the possibility that McCasland did not leave his home on foot, that he could have been picked up in a vehicle. Hopefully they're still tracking that. They're still continuing a digital search. When the FBI became involved, it's, from my perspective, what I saw in the news was, did the nation begin to wake up to this monumental news and, the implications of it all? And many immediately did grasp the implications. I've said from the beginning, that's a silver alert. Did McCasland and the search for him no favors. It severely limited the search in key ways, in addition to a lack of news coverage. Critically, his house was never sealed off, preserved for forensic search of any DNA or any other hidden evidence because no foul play was suspected. Meanwhile, his wife blasted online theorists for making any connection between the general's UAP knowledge and his proximity as an insider and his work with the UAP community, and the president's recent startling order to identify and declassify and release all of those very records that McCasland had been in charge of. Furthermore, it has been reported that in the days leading up to the general's disappearance, the president had been assembling a UAP transparency task force with a short list of potential advisors to call upon to serve as a UAP czar. Reportedly, McCasland was at the top of that list, with some colleagues saying that he actually had made tentative plans to travel to D.C. on March the 2nd. But McCasland's wife, she said, focus on the ground search. Well, as the ground search draws to a quiet end, I cannot help feeling that more could be done, that there have been missed opportunities. And there are so many questions still unaddressed, such as the repairman, the last person, not even his wife, the last person who saw McCasland alive. Who is he? Who does he work for? What was he there to fix or check on? And why is there no camera evidence of his arrival or departure from their house? I'd really think that we might hear more about him since apparently the whole thrust and focus of this search came from his statement about the mental fog. That's where it came from. He confirmed the general as being in a mental fog, which could conceivably support the sheriff's new #1 scenario of a walk-off. It all feels very incomplete and unfinished, and it just screams of strangeness. Like when all those high-level Russians kept falling out of windows all of a sudden when Putin's war was going badly. Here's my own personal thoughts. I still think that the general was abducted, but not by aliens, by human beings, working at a very secret level within our own government to discredit McCasland and to contain the imminent threat that he posed by virtue of his career as an insider with that background and knowledge and the advisory work he had done and continued doing. After all, when he retired in 2013, right after that, McCasland briefly worked as an unpaid consultant for a group researching UAPs and UFOs. I believe that was the To the Stars Academy at the time, working with Luis Elizondo and Tom DeLong and Christopher Mellon. Now, the fact that he refused any pay to work as an advisor for them, to my mind, speaks of a man who held strong enough convictions about public disclosure that he did not want to take away from their funding any money that they had, any resource that they could throw at this, so that they would have every chance of succeeding. And in my opinion, it was at that point that he possibly received his first warning from the secret government. So his work promptly dropped off and went nowhere. One of the last groups he worked for since 2019 was Riverside Research, a group that manages advanced sensor data, the very tools that are used for UAP and UFO detection. And these tools are often the focus of transparency bills, such as the UAP Disclosure Act. Only recently, in the last few months, did McCasland step away from this and other groups he had been advising, reportedly due to brain fog. But I think his brain fog was fear. It is well known the government threatens whistleblowers. It's also documented what happened to Albert Bender, to August and Dominic Lucchese, and others who knew too much and were written about in the years after the Roswell crash. Fear was, in my opinion, more likely what was behind McCasland stepping away from those groups in recent months. In my opinion, it indicates that he had received another warning as the president's efforts began to assemble a UAP transparency task force on the advice of Luis Elizondo earlier last year. Because of the timing of this whole matter, I tend to think this is more likely what's really behind McCasland's disappearance, just days after the president publicly announced his order to immediately identify, declassify, and release all records on UAPs and extraterrestrial life. Suddenly, the man at the top of that short list and uniquely qualified to work on fulfilling such a sweeping order suddenly finds that he can no longer live with his brain fog and walks off with a .38 revolver to end it all and vanishes without a trace. Maybe to some, it seems more likely that he did indeed suffer from some unnamed mental health issue recently, and that he did leave home that day with the intention of never returning. To me, it makes far more sense that he would have been warned since his retirement to stop working and advising on UAP disclosure, but he never completely stopped. He found ways to continue helping discreetly. But sometime after the president's 2025 decision to form a UAP transparency task force, I think McCasland received a final and ominous warning. And this time, It was along with his wife. And out of concern for her safety, he stepped away from the groups he'd been working with once and for all. From that point, he would have been living in some degree of fear and even paranoia about those watching his every move. He may have begun carrying a firearm at that point. Then came the president's astounding order. It was abundantly clear who would be called up to task. And warnings would not keep the general away from disclosure this time, not at the president's order. In the hours after Trump's announcement, billions of files stored on UFO-related databases were reportedly deleted, scrubbed before they could ever be reviewed. This is the level to which the secret government is willing to go to keep containment on the whole truth of UFOs. 7 days later, they came for General McCasland. That's my theory. I'm interested to hear yours. What do you think of authorities quietly ending the ground search for General McCasland? And what's your opinion about the general's brain fog and the role it may have played in his disappearance? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching. And stay safe out there.